So this is about the neuropsychological underpinnings of shame. Shame is familiar. It's a very familiar human being, obviously. And without a doubt, feelings of shame are the most difficult to tolerate. In essence, it's a serious injury to one's sense of self. It's a searing, visceral pain. Again, we're all familiar with it. A visceral pain, feeling of self-disgust and humiliation, sometimes guilt. And in the midst of feeling shame, there is little hope for redemption, for a more positive outlook of who we are. We become really dark and self-flagellating. A common experience is the wish to be swallowed up and disappear altogether. At times, acute feelings of shame result in confusion, an inability to think, speak, and in a sense of disintegration even in the most acute states. Okay, often shame and embarrassment are experienced in the presence of others, but shame can also be experienced away from others, triggered by a spontaneous memory of some perceived humiliating context, by some remarks that people make about us, about memory where we think that we screwed up something and exposed ourselves to others as deficient. The next headline is the integrated brain, the intertwined connection of shame with panic and anxiety. And as we'll see, these intertwined emotions are very important to the maintenance of the feelings of shame. Because regardless of the initial source or the trigger of shame, shame is unique in its ability to cause an overwhelming state of panic. In addition, the fear of being shamed results in ongoing chronic anxiety. Significantly, feelings of shame persist even as we move away from the internal or external source of humiliation. It really haunts us in a way. If something shameful happens and we exaggerate it in our brain and mind, it literally haunts us. It keeps coming up and being triggered. At those times, the memories of real or perceived mistakes, vulnerabilities, flaws that we think we have, are just as painfully raw as when they were first experienced. Now, this is really the power of shame. It's like hard to move on from. It stays with us. Like other primary emotions, shame is not learned, but innate. And like other emotions, it has been shaped by evolutionary pressures. So just like anxiety is an evolutionary result, so is shame. Emotions, I just want to have one very little thing about what emotions, how we see emotion and how they are relevant to the emotion of shame. Emotions are brain, body, mind processes, part of the circuit, that develop to ensure survival and optimal functioning, both for the individual and the group. The view that emotions are innate emphasize their embodied nature, meaning we really experience them viscerally. They are part of our brain, mind, body circuits that connect the three. There's no separation between body, mind, and brain. They really are one. A thought is in the brain, a feeling is in the brain body. So it's all one circuit. We really are it's a unit that we are dealing with. In general, visceral, fast occurring sensations signify the presence of danger or reward. This is basically what feelings are, emotions are. Something feels good or doesn't feel good. If it doesn't feel good, we are looking for adaptive behavior to defend against it. If it feels good, we want more of the same. And this is, by the way, a lot of neuroscientists' view of emotions, among others, Damasio and Adolf and Anderson. And it's very good lens to look at emotions. Among the 7 emotion states, at least as identified by Panksepp, the researcher who dealt a lot with emotions, he talks about seeking expectancy, fear, anxiety, rage, anger, lust, sexual excitement, care, nurturance, panic, grief. But among all these emotions that people mention, fear and anxiety became indispensable in securing our survival in maybe even millions of years ago, and certainly a few thousand years ago, going back. Because without this fear, anxiety, we would not survive as a species. We would not know where not to go, where not to eat even, where not to engage with, whether it's animals or places that were dangerous. But with development, as we develop, as individuals, all these emotions become blended. And as we will see in the following segments, the relationship between fear, the fear system, as we call it, and shame is especially strong. Now I'm going to talk a little bit here and later on about the amygdala. We have 2 of them. It's like a small almond-shaped regions in the limbic system, what used to be called the limbic system. And the amygdala and its related regions process many emotions. But as numerous studies have shown, really, there's a huge body of research. The amygdala is particularly sensitive to threats of impending danger, real or imagined. And this is how we survive, basically. In effect, the amygdala functions as the alerting system, urging us through visceral sensation, because we feel we all have felt anxiety or panic. So we know, don't go there, right? The amygdala and its vigilance have become extremely successful in its mission of survival. And it seems, what a lot of people say, that it has done so at the expense of a more stable sense of well-being and regulation. It's very fast and automatic. So it can dysregulate us very quickly. If we didn't have it, I guess it would just be like this, but then we wouldn't survive. We wouldn't know what decisions to make. As a result, the fear system, which is panic, fear, anxiety, acquired a very robust presence in our brains, minds, and bodies. At the heart of the experience of shame is the dread of being inferior to others, right? So this is how it begins to be blended. Shame begins to be blended with anxious feelings, being judged by them, right? Anxious about that, and exposed, we fearful to be exposed as flawed and therefore deficient. The disapproval of others can lead to intense anxiety about the intactness of our sense of self. Who are we when we are so disapproved of and judged? And to despair associated with being injured or even annihilated by those we value and depend on, especially when those people are critical of us and see us as deficient. It's very hurtful. This is especially so in cases of severe abuse, when being helpless may result in extreme panic, intertwined with the shame attached to the loss of one's subjectivity. And here is where shame, fear, and anxiety are entwined. one wonders whether the evolutionary function of shame has been to motivate members of a group, of a tribe, of people of a clan in a cave, or the hunters-gatherers, to fit in, to contribute, and perform well in order to be accepted, supported, and approved on, right? So it makes sense. I don't know how we can prove it, but it makes sense that being a contributed member, valued member of the group makes one feel good, because it becomes, he or she become part of a group that's very important, and we depend on that group for sustenance, for support, for all of that. It is not surprising then that in light of the connection between shame and the fear system, subjects with social anxiety, for instance, also experience intense shame. So you can see it in people that they feel both things. Shame was also present among adults who were diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder or excess worry, rumination. Excess worry and rumination are also symptoms of generalized, of course, anxiety disorder. Shame was also associated with a sense of inadequacy, excess fears of being vulnerable, avoidant behaviors, losing control over one's subjectivity. Another important aspect that such studies highlight is the fact that, like all other feelings and traits, shame is strongly influenced by temperamental factors. And this, I will say it here, but I think as we go on to more specifics, I think it's good to keep in mind, because we all are born with temperaments, and one of the most, again, because of the importance of anxiety, one of the most important one is whether people are born anxious and shy, or more robust and inherently resilient. Now, of course, it is absolutely not black and white. And there are a lot of overlap. People can be both anxious and resilient. It really depends on how all this genetic material arranges itself. But it's important to keep in mind, because there are a lot of studies that show that kids who are born more anxious and shy are more vulnerable to environmental factors, and we'll go into these environmental factors. For instance, young adults with a predisposition for anxiety and shyness experience shame more intensely and in more areas of their lives. So that, again, has been from Kagan on, who talked about temperament, has been repeated many times in terms of studies. This may explain why some children who were raised in dysregulated homes, really severely dysregulated, do not grow into excessively anxious and shy adults. An innate shy and anxious temperament will render toddlers, for instance, will make toddlers, children and adolescents, more sensitive to shaming interactions. So if one is more sensitive already and brings that sensitivity to the environment, the whole interaction between environment and temperament, becomes different depending on the temperament. Okay, so as I said, I want to keep in mind this interaction, this epigenetic interaction between temperament and environmental factors. Okay, so now I'm talking about developmental processes, intersubjectivity. So I'm going to start talking about what factors in the immediate environment of a child can affect that sense of shame. Self-conscious feelings, especially the emergent experience of shame, begin approximately between 18 and 24 months. Again, that I won't cite the names, but again, it's all what I'm saying is based on lots and lots of studies and research. Such dysregulating feelings are rooted, the source is in the child's earliest emotional experience within the intersubjective environments. These interactions will shape many of the child's encoded memories, forming the earliest neural representations of that experience, of the visceral and emotional state of shame and anxiety. So from very beginning, all these experiences are encoded. Every experience, by the way, is encoded, including starting in utero. What's important to keep in mind, though, is that the concept of the brain-mind as learning entity is like a learning machine. A lot of implicit learning happens from the very beginning, and again, even in utero. The brain is bombarded with stimulation, and it learns without any awareness on our part. So that, again, is something that is very interesting and very, very important to keep in mind. So what is this intersubjectivity? Intersubjectivity can be defined as this pervasive and ongoing mutual experiences driven by conscious and unconscious, verbal and nonverbal communications. As a result of the child's need for attunement, because the child needs attunement from the parent, right? That's to just thrive, to be connected. So alongside their separateness, children are also separate. They're born with their own sense of self, even when it's very nascent, when it's very little. But a part of them is always attuned to the parents. It is attuned to the caregiver's physical presence, emotions, and vocal communications. The child, like a part, is always there. And anybody who's had a baby child knows that, how even the gaze at the beginning of life is just kind of drinking the parents in. This lack of differentiation is not simply a result of the child's non-existent subjectivity. It really is this deep attentiveness of the child to the parent's state of mind and behavior. And it really is part of an active psychobiological need. This ongoing attentiveness to the parent or a caregiver is an aspect of the all-important attachment needs that children have. Paying close attention to the caregiver ensures the child's sense of togetherness and therefore security. So now you're already starting to see, on the one hand, we have the learning brain or the reactive brain, which react to everything around, and the child's absorption in the parents. So you can see how so much of what happens just gets internalized automatically and implicitly. So the child, this intersubjective process, I'm talking about this thing between the child and the caregiver, focuses on, the child focuses on the adult. And some people have developed some kind of a model that they talk about 3 phases of this intersubjective or attachment or absorbed in each other process. So they talk about the primary phase of intersubjectivity emphasizes the verbal and nonverbal exchanges between parents and infants. You know, the cooing, the mirroring, that parents do spontaneously, mirroring faces. The child mirrors the parent's face, parents mirror the child face, but you can see the back and forth. This is the intersubjective thing. And we know, again, from tons of studies, that infants and toddlers have show particular sensitivity to the expression of the vocal tones of adults. By the way, there are lots of studies with infants and toddlers, and when exposed to danger, like unpleasant tones, kind of scrambled faces that babies don't like because babies like faces, the amygdala reacts. And do we assume that there's some reactivity in the body? But for sure, the amygdala is active even then. The secondaries, those important years of toddlers, and what happens there, the toddlers seek shared intentions, shared experiences, shared emotions, thoughts, behaviors. And this is around the time when they start to walk, around 18 months. And this becomes the foundation of the child's sense of self. During this phase, a shared experience about the toddler's sense of competency and accomplishment is especially important. Yeah, even the little things, crawling, standing, finding something. Kids do all these things that they want the parent or the caregiver to resonate with, to kind of validate what they have done or think, starting to talk. Toddlers often seek confirmations and emotional echoes to their exuberance. Like if you see a toddler, you can see how sometimes they're so over the top. So they want, rather than being punished or being subdued, maybe a parent wants to celebrate that too, because this is what, to mirror that feelings. Toddlers are especially animated by feelings of pride and quest for autonomy, which again, I think is a good thing to encourage. But at the same time, they are also sensitive to disapproving and overly harsh communications that arouse feelings of shame, disappointment, and a sense of deflation. And I think deflation is a very good word here, because the toddler is so full of life and full of healthy narcissism, and if a parent doesn't meet that exuberance or happiness, they get deflated. Again, leaves a mark, gets encoded, doesn't get forgotten, not necessarily explicitly, but it's somewhere there, and you'll see where it goes. So this is from 18 month of age on. And the tertiary, the third one, is between 3 and 6 years old. These years, also important, are defined by even greater absorption in the thoughts and emotions of others. As a child's cognitive skills expand, they become increasingly entangled with the caregiver's emotional, cognitive, and behavioral traits. During this phase, there is a significant increase in the child's ability to ruminate, think of themselves in an autobiographical mode, utilize their imagination, and give meaning to emotional events. This is underpinned by the default mode network. We won't have time to go into that part, but it happens. So you can see already that if this absorption in the adult and giving meaning to emotional event, you can see how it can go both ways. Because if a parent is punitive or too controlling, the interpretation of the child is that something is wrong with them because they believe the parent. It can go in a good way to really get a good attunement and a good kind of validation again. Although, of course, nothing happens all the time. There's no perfect parent and there's no perfect situation. I guess in general, we talk about what's more. the disapproving or the validating. So during these years, intersubjective period, there's a lot of opportunities for children to learn from and identify with their parents' behavior. In an unconscious manner, the adults' attitudes towards them, towards the kids, become part of their own identity. The kids get their own identity from how a parent treats them. Shaming a child for the exuberance, noisy childhood, or all kinds of fantasies and wishes will be implicitly encoded and lay the foundation for further negative feelings about the self. Again, the child's temperament is there, but we can remember that. But to make things even more complicated, the kids are exposed to two kinds of communications that they implicitly encode. Encode meaning that memories of those experiences become part of the synapses, right? I don't know much to go into the neuropsych, but that's exactly what it means. The brain encodes, it's kind of the synaptic connections are learning, and then the memory gets to be part of the brain. One is the direct communication toward the child on one hand, either critical or accepting, right? The other one is the parents' own internal feelings about themselves, right? So parents' own shame, not connected to the kid, but their own shame about their lives, about their own childhood, about their own psychology, is also internalized by the child because it gets transmitted to the kid. So we get two kinds of communication from the parents, direct, and we also very attuned to their self states and emotions. So how does all this thing work? For instance, what underpins those processes of taking the parents in, believing the parents, making the parents' emotional world my own, taking the shaming very seriously and totally making it my fault. I'd done something wrong as a kid. For instance, research on mirror neuron system, the mirror neuron system, demonstrate how the child's susceptibility to negative states of shame is there from very early. The mirror neuron system, which is in the right here in the motor neurons, establishes a neuropsychological link between interacting subjectivity that observe and relate to each other. The first studies were about monkeys, that their brains started clicking and reacting to everything that they would just, monkey see, monkey do, basically. But we are the same in a sense that our motor area clicks, gets activated when we watch somebody do something. But it's not only about action. It's about intentionality. It's about emotional state. Some people think it's the seat of empathy that some people have, that we can really read the other person and know what they feel, more or less, of course. So when kids, right, mirror the parents mirror the kids' mirror neuron system will react to how the parents feel about them again, and how the parents feel about themselves. And we know that one of the problems with kids, I don't know, shouldn't say problem, but one of the phenomenon is the kids really take care of their parents, many kids. And they do it especially when the parents is in an emotional trouble. When the parents are stressed, instinctively, kids want to make them feel better. They really try to take care of. They know what the parents feel. And kids really, this is when you see kids are so sensitive to the environment. partly it's because of the mirror neural system. So because they support, this system supports the intersubjective building blocks of attachment and identification. We take stuff in. But as much as we can identify with positive, how much the parent supports us and likes us, we also identify with and take in the negative ideas and attitudes that the parents have about us and them. So it always can go both places. And we unconsciously imitate, unconsciously learn, and unconsciously come to conclusions about who we are. Now, the thing about shame, when you listen to people, a lot of times it really sounds, when you listen to patients, I should say, a lot of times it sounds kind of irrational. Why? How do you feel this? You're so talented. You're so, you're competent. You can do things. What difference does it make what other people say about you? All of these questions is the more rational, right? Questions we may have about what's going on with this. But the feelings of shame are such that they're not under the kind of the umbrella of this cognitive rationality. They really are very painful and totally convincing. They're convincing. I can say things, no, you shouldn't feel this. It doesn't matter because the feeling is very real. It comes from the brain, from the reservoir of memories, and they seem very real. So how does it happen? So there's a very, very interesting line of research here. There's the tendency to internalize a negative, shameful perception about oneself is because, I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I find it very exciting. So I want to talk about it for 2 minutes, that before the age of 4 or 5, rare instances, maybe 3.5, children do not yet understand that their parents' words are just opinions that do not actually reflect the reality of who the child is. So if a parent criticizes you, if they criticize you, they are right. I don't say to myself, oh, my mother has a migraine today, or my father came back from work with a bad mood. No, if they say it, it's true. It's a true to the child before that age. It's a true description of the child's psyche, of the child's flaws. And this innate tendency to believe adults influences the emotional nature of the child's internalized sense of shame of themselves. A child, this total belief in the adults' take on the world, as if it's totally reflecting reality, is due to the slower development of the prefrontal cortex. Only when a particular region comes online, it's the right temporal parietal junction, around 4 or 5, children start to recognize that the actions and opinions of others do not reflect reality. It's their opinion. But in therapy, one of the things that happen, we kind of untangle, and the child/adult comes to the realization, just because my mother criticized me or because I was shamed doesn't mean that I am so. But it takes effort and time, as we know. It doesn't happen overnight. So when I found this piece of research, it really explained to me a lot. It's the same as the understanding that for young kids, before the development of both the prefrontal cortex, which is really understanding and planning and having perspective, and the development, the left hemisphere also is slower to develop. So all of this put the child in kind of a disadvantage in terms of understanding what's going on. So all that reigns, that all that is important there is the emotion of pain, of being shamed. I am totally believing that this is my fault. I'm really not okay. And everybody has their own version of not okay, of what makes me not okay. Why am I so easily shamed, or I think I'm shamed, or I carry this feeling, this heavy feeling in me? Now, I want to talk about some precursors of shame. Some of them, I think, inevitable, but I put a question mark there. Because even within the most loving and supportive family, and there are many opportunities for judgment, disapproval, and insults, things that the parents are totally unaware of. They may tease a child, they may make fun of them, they may laugh at them. Again, depends on the child. But if you have a very sensitive child, maybe you don't want to do it, because the child, again, until 4 or 5, will take it very seriously. And again, the conclusion is, yeah, my parents are right. Some things are very wrong with me. Now that knowledge, in quotes, right, what the brain learns, just becomes part of the sense of self, of the circuits in the brain, and can get easily activated and dysregulate the child. For instance, parents struggle with their own stuff, right? They have the moods, they have their past, they have their own parents that they deal with internally, right? Or sometimes externally. All of that. They have their own problems with self-worth. Or a thing that I recently heard, for instance, the mother was so afraid of germs. She loved her kid, but she was so afraid of germs that she usually would not hug him enough, or just keep pushing him to wash his hands, and everything had to be so tip-top before she could even interact with him. So she didn't mean to reject him, but obviously she did. And the child did grow up to be an adult with a lot of shame feelings in himself. Other reasons can be school bullying, which I think should be a big issue. They develop the ongoing anxiety and shame about failing because of learning disabilities, especially if those learning disabilities are not diagnosed. And then they compare themselves to other kids and they are deficient. In the absence of parental support, teachers understanding it, many kids grow up with a lot of shame and anxiety about their own abilities. And I'm sure every therapist has seen kids with a history of learning disabilities and how it has affected them, especially the shame issue. Other things that are out of child's control, sometimes the parents, is, for instance, poverty, or parents who cannot provide well, and that the child makes the child feel something is wrong with their parents. Therefore, remember the identification. Want to take care of them. I'm like them. Something is wrong with all of us as a family. Other issues of very bad relationships between the parents, and a bad divorce can do it too, in a sense that the child doesn't separate yet. What is the parent's role? What is me? And indeed, sometimes, kids say it was my fault. I was bad. But again, if you think of what we've talked about so far, this narrative that develops so early are distorting the real essence of the child. The child internalized all kinds of ideas and developed them in a very irrational way. blaming herself, for whatever was going on. And racial discrimination is another factor that was found to make kids anxious and shamed. Again, there's quite a big body of studies about that. Okay, so all of these and many more, consciously and unconsciously, get the child to interpret reality, the reality of who they are, a certain way, in a negative way, especially in an environment that is very critical and negative. Before, again, remember the understanding that it's not me, it's my mother is like whatever. It becomes a building block of our sense of worth, of our self-esteem, of how dysregulated we get when that bad self-esteem gets activated. Now, how does it work in the brain mind? So it's because the brain is really totally connected. There are wide links between all the regions of the brain. So all the emotions, the memories, the habits, and all the learning that takes place result in neural maps that spread around the brain. Again, this is Damasio's concept of a map. Each map, this is important, coalesces around a primary emotion that underpins those neural maps or self-states. Roughly, very roughly, such self-states can be divided into negative or positive one. Those suffused with underpinned by anxiety, sadness, anger, self-blame, shame, guilt, and other negative feelings. Another state is characterized by a more prevalent positive outlook, positive memories, self-acceptance, resilience. Of course, it is not black and white. A lot of it is melded. And it's a problem, just as an aside, is not that we have a negative self-state. All of us have, because we all were babies once, and the attunement wasn't perfect, parenting wasn't perfect. The trick is not to be very split between the good and the bad, because that would create this like the borderline kind of structure that we don't know that, okay, I feel shame now, but I know why it is. I'll be okay tomorrow. I don't just live the negative. The split is very important between those two states, or more than two. So this is all these maps, / self-states are really our unconscious. These are unconscious realm. We don't have access to the memories really, right? Especially 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't have memories of daily interactions, most of us, some more than others, but they have already created a map. And the map anticipates already. It already is looking for proof. If I feel a great, intense shame, and my shame map is very robust, my brain automatically and out of my awareness will look for validation. This is what the unconscious does, right? It will seek just what I think, expectation. The expectations, unconscious, again, this map creates unconscious expectations. So I have an unconscious expectation to be shamed by others. Maybe I won't go to the party because I'm too anxious. I am not even aware of it. I just don't feel like going to the party, right? I don't know that it's because my shame map and my anxiety about being judged, but it's my anxiety and I need to become aware of it. It's my shame, I need to become aware of it, but Unless I'm aware of it, I will just not, I won't go to the party, and I won't even know why. I just don't feel like it. But that's not the reason. So this is where the destructive long-term effects of shame happen. I was looking at the time. Because the amygdala, again, to go back to that important organ here, and all the circus that surround it, it has tentacles. The amygdala is related to every area in the brain. So imagine the little region that processes anxiety is all over. From the little almond-shaped thing, it has a lot of axons to all other areas in the brain. It has connections. And by the way, as I keep saying, because I think it's really important, it is active even prior to birth. Already at the 8-9 month, the amygdala can respond to stress. This is why kids who grow up, who are born to mothers who are very, very stressed during pregnancy, they carry something with them. Again, unconsciously, there was a child, an 8 month in utero, but the amygdala already would influence the brain. So how does the amygdala influence everything? Because if the amygdala processes a memory, emotional memory, an experience of shame, for instance, it will send the axons, it will send the connections, call it connections for like a little easier, to other areas in the brain. It will affect it will lay down negative memories because it will affect the memories. It will result in negative thoughts because it affects cognitive features. It will result in bad feelings about myself because it affects other feelings as well. It really colors a lot of who we are. And this is how the map gets entrenched. And especially if it's reinforced. So more and more experiences of shame or negative feelings will reinforce that map of bad feelings about oneself. This is especially so with encoded experiences of shame that are suffused with panic and anxiety. One shame-centered network or a map or a pattern or self-state, we can call it a lot of names, but we call it a network. Once it's created and reinforced, it unconsciously looks for confirmation. It will quickly interpret and distort our perception of how others see us. It will distort the meaning of interactions in a biased way. So this is where the effect is long-term. Now, I don't even need shaming experiences to feel shame. I only have to imagine that somebody looked at me the wrong way. Somebody. Okay. Okay. So now I will already imagine or project, to use the word. My unconscious will project that people are not nice to me, that they are out to devalue me. I will see devaluing where it really doesn't exist. But by now, because I have this strong shame self-state in my brain network, I will just project it. And this is what projection is really about. And you can see it in patients. Okay, so this is how self-narratives develop. In human in humans, all these affective states, especially the negative ones, but not only, obviously, are accompanied by the cognitive changes because I have to interpret what is going on. And this finding meaning in what is going on emotionally is really very important to humans. And the meaning that I give to a negative interaction that, let's say, shamed me or injured me stays with me. And the negative meaning is either something is wrong with me, some people go the other way. People are terrible. I cannot trust them. People really just are not trustworthy, and I don't want to be around them. So what is particularly difficult is the narratives that develop because they are accessible to us and they get easily activated every time. Automatically, they're activated automatically out of our awareness every time we think or we feel that we are shamed. And again, we may exaggerate, we may project, the shaming may not be there, because we have to think of that too. By now, the projections, right, of shaming, every time it comes up, the automatic narrative comes up. Something is wrong with me. Something is not, deficient. Something is deficient with me. I am not good as others. How many therapists, right, have you heard people just constantly comparing themselves to others? And they always are on the losing end because everybody else is better. That happens automatically. But they're better in this and they're better in that. I'm not as good. And I should be very careful not to be exposed, because if I'm going to be exposed, like what they used to call or still do, the syndrome of just, kind of imposters, right? I'm an imposter. So I need to be really hiding myself because I don't want to be found out as not as good. But again, a lot of it is not bound in reality. So these narratives, by the way, again, start very early. We would say from the toddler years with harsh no's. Let's say the parents say a lot of harsh, no, don't do this, don't do that, right? So the no already gets to become part of that narrative. The no, something is not right, something is not okay. And again, remember of the early years, it's always centered around me. It's my fault as a child. So the no starts. And then as language becomes much more symbolic and the child starts talking, it carries the emotions, right? And the narratives provide the link between the embodied feeling of shame, for instance, the pain of shame, and some kind of understanding. So in those early years when there's no perspective, as we said, the narrative starts as something is wrong with me. This is the kernel of the shame for many years to come, until people either meditate or go to therapy. One can deal with it, of course, but it becomes entrenched. And again, this is how the brain works. Not that anybody kind of volitionally want to go there, but the brain has certain ways in which it works. And once it establishes a kind of a map or a self state, it's there until we become aware of it and work on it. So, and again, indeed, when you listen to patients, adult patients of all ages, doesn't matter what the age, but adults, young adults to old age, one can often feel and hear and connect with the old, pained, and immature child part because it's so irrational. Everybody's better than me. I cannot do this job. I will be found out. I'm not good enough. Any variation on the topic, but it's not. Even if one is not the genius of the generation, has nothing to do with it. It's really about an internal state of lack of trust in oneself and a tremendous fear of being found as deficient as I think of myself, as worthless as I think of myself, consciously and unconsciously, because a lot of this stuff is unconscious. So when those self narratives get enmeshed with the feeling of shame, this is how we have them when they come up. And it can go so severely as when people feel the panic of really being shamed, something very terrible happened, that they feel like they're going to be annihilated. They want to, disappear. Like a famous thing is that I want to disappear from the face. I want the earth to swallow me, right? I cannot relate to others. I cannot relate to myself because I'm so upset with myself. I'm so pained. I want to just be swallowed up. So, because it's so difficult to experience all of it, we have to use defenses, right? We have to. It's just automatic again. It's like we see defenses in amoebas. You shine a light on them, they run away. Or any animal, they'll run. It's like, this is how we survived. So from early on, fears of feeling shame unconsciously result in defenses whose main function is to avoid situations that may hold the potential for failure and therefore the searing pain of shame. The innate and automatic inclination to avoid, again, it's an innate thing, like as we see it in all creatures. The innate automatic inclination to avoid the state of anxiety and shame can become generalized, leading to a wide range of avoidant behaviors. Now, we all use some kind of avoidance, but avoidance is really, in one hand, is a very efficient defense. On the other hand, is very destructive. And I'm sure you've all seen plenty of avoidant behavior. It's very difficult to kind of dislodge. It's very difficult to change because it's so efficient. If it protects one from the anxiety of shame, why would I give it up? So entrenched avoidant behaviors do not allow us to learn from reality or relearn how to deal with new challenging situation. I will just avoid them. I won't put myself in a new job or new situations where I'm afraid I will not be okay. And again, part of therapy is how to ease people, how to help them put themselves in situations that are new and take on challenges. Now, another interesting defense, there are many, but I just want to focus on these two, the avoidance, and the other one, we may also develop cognitive strategies that are meant to protect us from the painful dysregulation of shame. They protect us from worthlessness, from insecurity, of vulnerability to others controlling us. And these strategies generate extreme compensatory defenses, which means in some people, such defenses may acquire narcissistic qualities, meaning such people, they are the best. They present themselves as flawless. They know everything. They really are so secure in themselves. It can be very annoying, but they really feel it. This is the defense that they developed. And those people often oscillate between two extreme structures, two extreme poles of being. It's like on one hand, they are not aware of their neural shame, right, pattern. On the other hand, they are covering on it unconsciously with all these narcissistic strategies, with narcissistic beliefs, with narcissistic behaviors. They need to be validated. You need, like we say, they need to be shored up because they need to hear how great they are, right? They need to feel superior to others, and they do, or display facade of flawlessness. For these people, it is often difficult to connect with the internal fears of being deficient or becoming aware of the dread of shame. And in therapy, sometimes it really takes time and effort to get there. Because if you're caught with these two opposing extremes, it really doesn't work. Because the narcissistic thing, if it remains in fantasy and people can fantasize one day they'll write the best novel because they're such writers, good writers, and they know everything, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work in reality. If they act on them, people can't stand them. It's also not, doesn't work. It's not great as a defense. However, it's very prevalent. And when you talk about narcissistic personality structure, this is really, think of the yin yang of it. Underneath it, there often this kind of the shame, unconscious shame, covered by all kinds of defenses not to feel it because it's very painful. And for them, doubly, they don't know that they'll survive it. They don't know that, okay, so I feel shame and I can deal with it and move on. For them, it's kind of, some people, a sense of annihilation, like we talked about before. There's nothing left. If I find out that I really am no good, it's the end of me. This is how strong it is. So, and often indeed, people start therapy because they suffer. They don't get along with people. They don't feel fulfilled by their job. They either could do better or they don't do enough. Okay, so do I have time? Oh, I'm done.
Ma'am, we can take 5 minutes, but there are two queries for you that we have.
Okay.
So, ma'am, you can take the call. You can take the call.
Okay, so I'll just talk for 2 minutes about therapy and self-awareness. So psychotherapy can be very helpful to give people the gift of awareness, right? Of self-awareness. Better understand their suffering, even if it really hurts. And understand that those brain, mind, body patterns, the circuits, whatever you want to call them, don't work for them. So it can be done in many, in a few ways. They can learn the source of why they feel like this, why, understanding the past and getting the perspective. Again, understanding that then when they were 4 or 5 and mother said something and it kind of cut to the heart and left me feeling so deflated. Okay, let's look at it again. So again, it's reframing what happened. It's understanding it through a different lens, to a different perspective. So the perspective is important. And also to learn to live with difficult feelings is another one. And one of the most difficult feelings, as we saw, is shame. So a lot of emotions don't just disappear, they become part of our brain. But this is not the problem. The problem is how we live them. We live with them. How we live with anxiety, how we live, because these are human emotions, how we live with guilt, how we live with shame, without drowning in it, without feeling that it's finishing us, that we are in a very bad place, very dysregulated. So we learn to live with all these feelings without being dysregulated. That is a big trick, but this is one of the best things that people can get out of therapy. And of course, through mindfulness. And I always, always, always recommend meditation, because people really learn to sit with themselves, to sit with their feeling without getting dysregulated. After a while, it doesn't happen at the beginning, but it's hard for people. But it's also extremely helpful. And again, becoming mindful that we search for meaning as children, we distorted what happened. We distorted the narratives we created. Just because we think or we thought stuff as a young kid, just because I was bullied, just because I didn't do the math correct, or a million and one things. Let's look at it now, again, reframe it and see, does it really call for such a low self-esteem, such self-punitiveness, right, that shame brings? Okay, but this is an important point for educators, especially understanding the great vulnerability of a young and growing brain, I think may help parents, teachers, and other caretakers to become more mindful about the power of their own behavior, about the power of their own words, because it really has an effect, even if we don't see it, even if we think it's benign. We have to know the kid. More sensitive kid, again, is more danger, but we have to respect the child's subjectivity. It's not like somebody to roll over and control. They have their own subjectivity, and our words matter, how behavior matters. So this is very important, because even if we don't see it, it is happening in terms of what the brain learns. Okay, so I think I'll stop. I can't hear.
I was on mute, sorry. Thank you for that wonderful talk. We have three queries right now. So the
Okay.
first one is, when a child has developed these schemes as a child, what is the way we can help them unlearn these schemes in later life? And also, if you could explain, children who seemingly have a lack of remorse, especially in conduct disorder, etc., are less prone to shame or overwhelmed by shame, causing them to develop a protective reaction to stop feeling that shame.
I don't know, the second one is very complicated, because again, I think we have to think more in terms of temperament and genetic predispositions. Now, it can be that a child who is without remorse, either, something may have, they bring something to the table in terms of how they're born. But the parents, either the parents lack empathy, and this is what they learn, because a child who has no remorse has no empathy, right? There's no empathy. They don't develop the theory of mind that another person has also their own pain, ideas, and thoughts. So maybe that's the lack of empathy, maybe the lack of attunement in the very first year or two, or the first three. We don't, we are not there. I mean, we would have to take tons and tons and tons of every kind of videos of how parents. All I can say is that if you look for videos about infants and mothers in their own line, it's called the still face. Tronic and Beatrice Bibi, you see that if a mother's face is very unresponsive, the child goes berserk. A 9-month-old. In another experiment, the mother puts her face right in the baby's face, and the baby really tries to get away as much as they can. So you can see even at 9 months, they sit in that chair. And I encourage you to see those. It's the still face experiment. They're not allowing to do it anymore, But it's such a good reminder that even if we don't see, no, I love my baby, I put my face in them, or I'm very busy, or I'm very hurried right now. I have my face like still. They go, you can see how they really try to get the mother to respond. They try and try. And when it doesn't happen because they told the mother to be still, they really go limp. So that may be the reason.
That makes
The
a lot of
first,
sense.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
The first one was about the therapy, right? How we, the schema,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. How do we unlearn these schemas in later life?
Right. So this is a very interesting question because there used to be a time when people would come to therapy and people and therapists would say, "I will help you uh, erase this. You'll get rid of anxiety. You'll get rid of that." It doesn't happen like that. Because if you think of stuff, it's in our brain, right? So unless they come up with the chip or the trying it with psilocybin now with drugs to kind of get the emotion out, it's not going to happen so easily. So what does happen is what I said before. We recognize it, we know it's there, but we don't drown in it. We know it's there, we understand it, and we move on. And we develop a whole other schema. So it's not so much that we necessarily get rid of the one, we develop a new one and let's make it stronger, more robust. So the other one becomes like very whisper, a weak whisper. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have another query. This is in the perspective of the balanced personality. So the query is, how can we balance between becoming excessively narcissistic and distorted thinking?
Say that again. I'm not sure I understand.
So the query, how can we balance between becoming excessively narcissistic and distorted thinking?
Ah, so the distorted thinking is part of the narcissistic.
I think so. I think so. They haven't clarified anymore, so that is the query, right?
Yeah, because the narcissism, yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of universal. I mean, and it's again, it's just like avoidance, but much more sophisticated. It protects us, so it becomes entrenched, and it can border with distorted thinking, because if I think I am better than everybody and I am going to prove it. I know everything. It's all unconscious. I don't know that the people want to inflict themselves in that way. But somebody who argues all the time because they have to win, because they have to know everything. Yeah, it borders on kind of, and again, without self knowledge, without self-awareness, I just can't go anywhere. Because then, one of the things that I didn't talk about, that is the automaticity of the brain. The brain really works on automatically activating those schemas. They just get activated automatically without our awareness. So they will just go on and on and on because this is what the brain learned that works. So unless we become aware, it will just continue and there's not going to be a balance. But we can get to a balance through therapy, through understanding what's going on.
All right, ma'am. So we have another follow-up query. I wanted to ask you if our participants have any further queries, if they can reach out to us, and if we can put those questions across to you, maybe later after the summit, if you would be open to answering those queries.
Okay, yeah, if I can, yes.
All right. All right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Ginot, for that
Okay,
amazing start to the day.
okay.
So reminding us that the roots of shame lie deep in the mind, yet
That's
understanding
right,
them can
exactly.
be, yeah, deeply liberating for our participants also, just to understand that a lot of it actually just comes from way before they actually started even perceiving, what was
Yeah,
happening and had
that's
maybe
right.
control over what was happening, right? So
Exactly
thank you
right.
so much. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're
this.
so
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great day ahead.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.